Self-driving napkin dispenser. Please welcome the man behind a lot of these changes at Georgia Pacific, John Strom.
I asked Steve to play that video as he suggested because with so many cool brands in the room, I felt compelled to show you a proof point that napkins and paper can be cool too. So hopefully that proves that out a little bit. But that's not what I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes or so talking to you about. Innovation is critically important to us, but I'm going to attempt to answer this same question that's been at the center of every conversation we've had over the last couple of days here, and give you a Georgia Pacific answer to the question, can big branding survive big data? And our answer is an emphatic, absolutely, positively yes, can they survive? And not only that, you should wish and want for that with every ounce of energy in your body. You should want that as if your life depended on it. Now, we also believe at GP that that survival and that thriving will require more purpose, more thoughtfulness, and probably more stewardship on behalf of your brands than maybe we historically had to provide. So that's what I'm going to tell you a little bit about, the journey we've been on over the last couple of years to consider that and contemplate what we need to do moving forward to make sure that we're being proper stewards of our brands. So we started about 5 years or so ago with this increasing kind of what we call restless discontent, that this B2B world that we serve, which has been terrific for us, by the way, with heritage companies that have been in existence for over 100 years and selling traditionally through most of that with great distributor partners, the likes of folks like Grainger and US Foods and Cisco and Staples that provide the wholesale distribution and delivery of our products to hospitality locations, to commercial office settings, to food service settings, to industrial manufacturing sites, to on and on, right? And we have a couple hundred sales folks who engage those couple 100,000 sellers in some shape or form. And historically, that has been the basis by which our leads have generated from. It's been the basis by which, as B2B buyers, had an unmet need that we found our way to solve for that. But this restless discontent started generating with us because as we were talking to folks and we were seeing behavior, we were realizing that every day that chipped by, this B2B buyer was starting to act more B2C-like. And before they contacted those sales folks, either our own or that distributor sales folks, they were getting online. They were doing their own research. And they were using online tools to comparison. They were looking for peer-to-peer reviews. They were doing that research up front. And some of them didn't even want to contact any sales rep at all. So against that backdrop, we decided, well, how well are we equipped? How good a shape are we in to serve that customer who is taking that consumer behavior that they do after work and apply it now during work? And we decided that with humility, we had some work to do. So the first thing we did was look at the marketplace that we serve. We have this portfolio, as you can probably imagine, ends up in all these locations against all these verticals, and that's a gift. But if you don't get purposeful and you don't consider where your right to win, where the likelihood of the next available sale can be, and what the profit implication of that is, you probably sub-optimized your opportunity. So we looked back a little bit, and I've left off some detail here, not that I'm not perfectly comfortable sharing it with all of you, but on the remote chance I've got some competitors watching, I'm not going to show you those cards. So, but anyways, I can describe the context to you. I think this will make sense to you. So we looked back and said, what is our historical profit performance? Where do we grow? Where is our right to win more obvious? And where does our solution set become more compelling or less so? And so we did that look back. And then we looked forward and said, both from a qualitative and quantitative standpoint, these industries we serve are, the end-use application of them is very similar, but based on who's involved from a partner standpoint, the mix, whether they're highly structured or whether they're decentralized, they end up looking very different. And so we made some predictions, and we started to stratify where we spend our precious resources, and that could be marketing, it's sales, it could be category, but starting to shift. So rather than take a buckshot approach and treat all of our opportunities equally, we said, what if we started to stratify, and what if we took our best opportunities and put a disproportionate amount of resources to them? Could we perform better? Could we be a better steward of our brands? Could we be a better steward of our precious resources? And so we've begun that exercise. And then we said, how does our brand portfolio, again, reflective of that B2B buyer who's acting more B2C-like, how well is our portfolio shored up for them to research us online and to make those considerations? And we are a heritage company of 4 or 5 different manufacturers that have come together over the years, and we never stopped through any of those acquisitions or mergers to consider what the mix of portfolio of brands looked like. And so again, with humility, we said, what are the odds that B2B buyer gets online and tries to navigate through all that to figure out what their particular unmet need, which of these solves that solution most effectively? What are the odds that happens unaided? And the technical term we came up for that was not so much. And so we said, these brands are not created equal. They don't have clear distinction between them in terms of what they mean and what they serve and how they act with one another. So we said maybe there's time where natural selection didn't pair any of these off. We needed to kick in a little bit of marketing Darwinism, I might call it. So anyway, so we began that work. And if you look at what happened to us from a dispenser standpoint, and again, with our products, the majority of them dispense out of some machine, some dispenser that sits on a restroom wall or a countertop in a food service operation. And these categories that create these things, they're individual P&Ls, they're different categories. So they worked together, but the output was inconsistent. Any one of them by themselves, look okay, right? But consistency, cohesiveness, not so much, right? So another opportunity. So, and then finally the assets, the marketing materials that we would create for our sales folks to represent these solutions. Again, no consistency there. Again, you take any one of them out by themselves, you'd probably say, hey, look okay. But what were we doing for our master brand? There was probably an opportunity there, right? So plenty to work on there, but all driven by this want, this need to say, in this world going increasingly online, how are we serving that customer in terms of navigating through all this? And we realized pretty quickly that we had a need/opportunity that we needed to solve for. So it began with establishing a framework, a brand foundation. And we took those 112 brands and we built the framework, good, better, best framework, and we did health metrics against them. This was emotional. This was, these categories, for these categories, these brands are their children. And we were saying, look, some of your kids aren't going to make the cut. And that, there was, I'll call it some healthy arm wrestling that ensued in moments. But the truth is we let the logic guide the conversation, and everybody knew in the end what we needed to do. So we established this framework that would guide us moving forward, and established basically an architecture that took that 112 brands down to about a dozen. And those brands now span categories that never happened before. We had an Emotion towel cabinet, okay, that was towels, but Emotion would never darken the door of soap, right? And Dixie was a cup brand. It never really was napkins. Now we have Dixie napkins. So brands that had identity that meant something to our customers that we could get behind and invest in, and then we could stratify in a good, better, best, so that unaided journey that a customer was taking on our behalf, they could figure out if more cleanly, more simply, what the solution was that met their unmet need. And we still, we have, as we introduce new solutions, we still get the challenge to say which brand fits this particular solution, but we've got a brand identity for each of these brands so we can reflect against it. We got a meeting on Friday. We're talking about a new solution and trying to contemplate which of these brands. The other thing we had to do was pull the decision rights away from the categories and pull them into marketing. So I ultimately have the final say on what product gets assigned what brand. I don't do that with a big stick, though. I do that reflecting on the work we've done and getting thoughtful and purposeful around what the name can be. And by the way, it could be a new one, but we're going to resist that because that's how we got to 112 to start with. So we're going to try to at least not get there overnight because it's taken a long time to redo it. So we have a framework. And then, as importantly, again, you remember the image of that, all those different dispensers. Now we have a visual brand language, consistent beveled lines and curves, and an aesthetic that makes buying these things in combination more compelling than buying them independent. If you buy a towel and a tissue and not the corresponding soap, you feel like something's missing in your life. That wasn't the case before. Now it's like it's a suite. And by the way, that's part of what we want to do, right? We want to sell a portfolio, not one-off. And so this aesthetic, this visual brand language helps us create that continuity. And that plays true as well in our marketing assets, whether it's brochures and banners and all the different literature. You saw the Smart Stock napkin teed up in the video. That, by the way, is meant to solve what's probably the most acute challenge that QSRs, quick service food service, has faced in their lifetime, which is labor. And this thing takes a lot of labor out of the equations, reduces napkin consumption dramatically. So we think we got a winner there. But again, the odds improve when you've got a consistent look and feel and a message about it. So again, we've got brand guidelines that we adhere to and create a more consistent look and feel. So we got that sort of sorted out and squared away, and that moves us to kind of the next level of content. And we couldn't possibly have prepared our content for the online universe of Amazon or Staples, and we talk about this Amazon First Lens. They're a relatively small player in our affairs. We know that'll grow over time, but in many ways they set the standard for what content on an online catalog ought to look like. And so we use that benchmark to create our content now for whether it's going to show up on Grainger.com or Staples.com or Amazon here, as these examples portray. But we had to go and reinvent our content. And they seem perfectly intuitive. They weren't to us, but things like you see there in the bottom right-hand image, putting the measurement of a dispenser on the image itself, so somebody wouldn't have to pour through to the bottom of below the fold content to try to figure out what the size of that thing is, or the image there in the top right-hand. Perfectly logical, probably to most of y'all, but people want to see an image of everything they get with that case of product. And whether the screws come to put the dispenser on it, that mounting bracket, whether it's included or not, they want to know. And they want to see the box too, right? And by the way, I mean, something we weren't very prolific in, but these online reviews, just as a consumer, you're going to go buy a jacket tonight online. You want to know if it's true to size. You want to know if it hangs in there in terms of a quality standpoint. Our B2B buyers want the same thing now, right? And they want video. They want a heavy dose of video, tight videos, whether it's loading or whether it's how to mount them. So we've had to spend a fair amount of effort and time to get caught up here, and we're on our way. So that feels reasonably good. The last piece of this is moving away from, traditionally being way too dependent on features and benefits and not dependent enough on the experience. And, we're blessed with a great research and insights team that helps inform future innovation. But we didn't necessarily apply that knowledge to market back information we could share with our customers that was meaningful, that could help make the experience, whether it was with or without our products involved, more creative. So here's an example of a campaign that we launched last year. We were doing research on behalf of our towel category, and we were contemplating, whether, how to redo our towel cabinet and whether to make the towel softer or longer or whatever the case may be. And one of the outcomes of that research is they were shadowing and studying these cleaning teams, which, by the way, are part and parcel to, as you can probably imagine, to maintaining our products in these commercial settings. One of the we learned a lot about these cleaning teams. And first of all, as you can probably imagine, those are incredibly difficult jobs. And they're incredibly tough jobs for the people that employ them as well, because they have extraordinarily high turnover. The turnover rate with these cleaning teams is north of 200%. Language is a terrific barrier. And so these are tough jobs, and these cleaning teams, or these employers that maintain these cleaning teams, have extraordinarily high turnover rates and whatnot. And so one of the things we learned, again, along the way, was that there were very few, if any, recognition programs in place with any of those companies. So there were very seldom any ways that these companies had in place to thank those employees that went the extra mile, that did a little effort here or stayed a little longer, whatever the case may be. They didn't have any recognition programs in place. So we said, okay, well, we'll go work on those towel innovations, but what if we created an off-the-shelf recognition program, a thank you program that had certificates in it, that had a thank you kit that gave away water bottles or backpacks or whatever the case may be, but a simple program that if you didn't have a recognition program, you could take ours and you could put that in place, and you wouldn't have to create it yourself. And maybe that would help with a little bit of enthusiasm, with a little bit of retention, with a little bit of making those jobs that are so hard just a little bit better for those folks that deserve that thank you. And it's been a terrific success. And we've gotten nice press on it. It allows us along the way, by the way, to talk about the innovation that we're providing into our systems. So as we build an aesthetic, a user interface into our dispensers that doesn't require language, to be in the mix, that allows dispensers to open up all the ways so that if you're shorter or taller or the accessibility is more difficult, it matters less. So it's an opportunity to describe those things that we're trying to help the cleaning teams with as well, but does that in a way that takes that, again, that research that we were doing anyways, and applying in a way that hopefully, when we find those places to apply it, provides a better all-over experience for our customers. So those are kind of the three main tenets of the work we've been busy at. I think one of the things that Steve asked me to describe was how you ever got that done. And it starts, you know, with overall executive alignment. You know, we had a shared vision in terms of what that restless discontent was and why we needed to act upon it. We needed alignment against, again, the stratification of our resources. Because again, whether it's your marketing resources or your sales resources, you can go and ask for more, or you can optimize what you got. And we thought this was in a moment to place bets against where the opportunities were going to pay higher dividends. And then finally, focusing on the experience more so than the traditional features and benefits of products. So that's what we've been busy at. Make sense? All right, thank you.
We have time for questions of John.
Hi, yeah, Andrew from Cicerone. Thanks so much, John. I saw something super subtle in the product design of one of the napkin dispensers that I believe must have had some larger discussions around, and that is the ability for the end user to self-select 1 or 2 napkins or 5, I think it was. It's really subtle, but I think we're all guilty of just going in and grabbing a stack of napkins. And so for your consumable business, I would imagine that, you know, if I'm only selecting 1, you know, your salespeople may not get as much paper orders with that, but it maybe it boosts your sustainability messaging. And I would love to know if you can share sort of the behind the scenes that you technologically provided the end user to prevent overconsumption of a product.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, right? The idea is that when you reduce consumption, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot a little bit, right? And a lot of our solutions do just that. This Smart Stock napkin, we've got it in a couple of chains now, and they're reporting consumption reduction 30, 50, 60%. And if that was our business prior, that's consumption reduction on our part as well, right? Now, it's not the same napkin. So, you know, in most of those conventional settings, it's a universal product. That Smart Stock napkin is a little bit of a Gillette razor blade model, right? You put that dispenser in there, guess whose product fits in there? Ours. It's a long-term commitment. So we get a stickiness out of that we might not in those commodity grades. So there's a long-term benefit. But, you know, I mean, I guess the bigger issue for us is that, you know, our reason for being has to be to help the customer ultimately, help them get at their wants, their needs. And quite frankly, if you can give a customer in that quick service restaurant space a solution that reduces their consumption, gives them a better hygiene solution, helps to solve for labor, there's no better trifecta for that operator. So our restless discontent, or what fuels us to provide that solution, is if we don't do it, there's a risk that somebody else will. So we want to be that company that provides that. And, you know, there are other folks that don't necessarily always benefit, right? I mean, the distributor partner that provides that, sometimes those models, those profitability models are based on the number of cases they provide. If we take 30, 50% of the cases out, the profitability of that user is less. But again, if your North Star is creating value, you gotta maintain, you know, that vigilant, right? And so we think that's a win in the long term for us.
John, when we were talking through this a couple times on the phone, there were a number of things that popped out that really fascinated me. The first is just that your thinking behind reducing the number of brands was in some part tied to your vision of how digital channels were changing how people related and discovered brands. That there wasn't, within this new way of consumers interacting with brands and discovering product, that there simply wasn't the same amount of room, that our focus was narrowed by these channels. Could you talk a little bit about how you were thinking about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's whether it's a grocery store shelf or whether it's an online shelf. Again, this idea that busy slide that showed all those brands, the idea that somebody would navigate through all that, they would have the patience to navigate through all that and find their unique solve for their need is a bad bet, right? You know, you know, again, we all have these traits as consumers. The risk exponentiates around experience breaks, right? So if and again, as a consumer, you know your own behavior. If you find inconsistent information, inaccurate information, if a site times out, all those things, you don't patiently try to navigate through that. You're out of there, right? And so the idea of setting forth, you know, that Amazon lens against all those and being foolproof, we just didn't like the odds of being able to pull that off. So a simplified portfolio, we think, we can get behind and we can provide less opportunity for those experience breaks, right? So that was the essence of the bet.
The other thing, I was interested in that slide where you delineated worst, better, best.
Yep.
In bringing down the brands. And one of the things I noticed is that in that middle tier were a lot of very familiar consumer brands.
Yeah.
And at the top tier were a lot of, I gather, are more familiar B2B brands that me, as a consumer, I don't know and identify with Georgia Pacific. So since so much things like the Amazon lens and the brand and some of the brand strategy were being formed by the basic consumer experience and how that was informing B2B buying.
Yeah.
I'm curious why the consumer brands weren't more important.
Well, that's a good question, and that's one that the consumer guys picked up on pretty quick too, as we were showing this to them. They didn't like that so much as well. But here's the reality. So what makes the cut in our framework for best is when we incorporate the kind of things that Andrew asked about, all right? So our best solutions provide consumption, you know, savings. They provide hygiene as part of it, right? In motion towel, you wave your hand, only that towel comes out. So that's a great hygiene solution. It provides labor savings. It provides operational efficiency. If you think about those consumer brands, you know, whether it's Quilted Northern or Brawny or Angel Soft, they're great products by themselves, but in a commercial setting, they don't provide any of that, right? They're universal products. So our stratification has those, we call it a CHIPS model. They either provide a cost and use solution, a hygiene solution, an image solve, a productivity solve, or a sustainability message. If they're compelling in some shape or form or a multiple of those, that's our stratification for the top tier.
And then finally, you have a content challenge that Amazon doesn't have. You have to distribute what you were showing up here. You have to distribute this content to a lot of partners, like Staples, like other business business intermediaries. How are you handling that part? Are you able to maintain that experience that you're talking about as you're distributing this to these intermediary partners?
Tough as nails, and a part that I'm glad you asked about, because you know, that's taken a resource requirement that we never even contemplated. So these customers that have robust online e-com platforms, they all sit in different versions of one another. And you know, the interesting thing is, I guess this is a gift. I mean, many of them ask us to maintain our content on their sites. That's a gift. We improve exponentially our shot at keeping that accurate that way. But all those platforms are different. So a description on one might be 26 words, and a description on another might be 23. Well, guess what we can't do? We can't whack the last 3 words. We got to rebuild the whole darn thing. And Grainger might want a red backdrop for the images, or they might require a 3D vision that's slightly different from a technology, you know, application than someone else, and on and on. So you know, we have hope that those platforms will consolidate technologically over time, but working through the nuances of those is heavy lifting for us today. But we're glad, like I said, to have it, because if we're doing it, we like our odds better than if someone else is doing it on our behalf. Yeah, you bet.